I'm Michael Ebs-Utley. I'm joined by Chris Rains and Bill Seaver. We're the co-producers of Reparteé, the show where we sit down with two leaders or entrepreneurs from a genre of business. And tonight's episode, we're getting set up right now. These guys are going to have a meal and we're going to discuss the business of music.
That's right. We're in Nashville, so it's only appropriate that we do a show on music. Our guests tonight, I'm really excited about these guests, by the way. The first one is Drew Holcomb.
Hey, there's a good light shining through.
His band, Drew Holcomb and the Neighbors, man, those guys are some of the hardest working, maybe the hardest working band in music right now. They've played 1,700 shows over the past 10 years. Recently sold out the Ryman here in Nashville. Did a spot on Jimmy Kimmel Live. And really, I think they're a picture of what it means to be successful in today's music business as an independent. And Bill, really excited to see what he has to say about being an independent artist today.
Yeah, and our other guest is Kix Brooks.
Get down, turn around, go to town, boot, scoot, boogie.
Kix is half of Brooks and Dunn, the most successful country music duo of all time. Brooks and Dunn has something like 30 million albums sold, 20 #1 hits. A lot of people know Brooks and Dunn for the music, but Kix is actually very active in business as well. He is a cattle rancher, he has his own vineyard, a lot of wines as part of the vineyard, and it just has his hands in a lot of different interesting things. So we're really excited to dig in tonight with Drew and Kix.
We'll be drinking that wine.
That's right. That's right. It's going to be some great conversation. We're glad you have the chance to listen in, be a part of the audience. Welcome to Reparteé.
Thank you guys for being here tonight. Thank you for joining me. One of the things that I think is really fascinating when you get together with people in any industry is that there's a lot of different perspectives. And I think there's a stereotype, it feels like, that the independent artist is really focused on the art of music, and people who have not maybe taken the independent path are focused on the business of music. And I'm curious, because Drew, you're known as an independent artist. Kix, you've clearly, gone through the more traditional channels. Is there any truth to the stereotypes?
Well, I think there's a lot of overlap, obviously, and just because you have success in a commercial venue, and I did when I got to Nashville and realized that guys like Christopherson and Willie and other guys that I really admired, from that other world, had figured out, helped me make it through the night, and these classic, simple, beautiful songs that were hugely commercially successful. There wasn't anything wrong with that. They were really proud of those songs and the fact that they were huge hits. And it kind of made me realize there's another kind of cool. There's, and I still write from the heart most of the songs that I write. Sometimes you sit down and if you're a professional songwriter, if that's how you make your living, which I did for 10 years, I got to feed my family. So George Strait's cutting this week, and as a student of music, anybody that writes a song, you have some craft. I don't care what kind of song you're writing. It pisses me off, sometimes when people go, this is cool, and that's not.
Yeah.
And granted, there's songs out there that aren't cool. I'll be the first one to say it, but when I sit down to write a song, I try to write a song that matters.
We were talking earlier about Chris Stapleton. One of the interesting things about kind of what was going on in social media world during that performance was there's a lot of grandstanding about, finally somebody is getting attention who's a real country artist. And the irony of that is, just like you, Chris has made his career before he made this record as a songwriter for mainstream country acts. And you can't have this false dichotomy that what he's doing now is completely separate from what he was writing as a songwriter. And I think another interesting thing too is that something that I learned is that there are a lot of ears in the world. And when I was 22 and a head full of pride, I was working on a record, and my producer and I were talking, and this was, I was kind of mocking a young pop singer, irrelevant who they are, and talking about how, how silly and one-dimensional the music was. And the producer just looked at me, and he had a 13-year-old daughter, and he just said, "You're a fool to think that you know what my daughter should be listening to." You know, and it's like everybody's making music for different reasons.
Do you feel like, it's interesting that you said it kind of pisses you off and you can be offended if people say, well, you're in for the business and not the art. And I wonder if from your standpoint...
People say you're selling out.
Yeah.
You know, because I work real hard at what I do, and I try to put my heart into it. And I write songs about things that affect my life and things that matter. And when you have success with those things, you know, it gives you pride. And when that pisses somebody off and they insult me because of that, then that pisses me off.
Yeah.
You know, because they don't know how hard I worked. You know, and how much it meant to me.
Yeah. Well, and Drew, you toured 10 years, 1,700 shows, I think. I mean, there's got to be a lot of business in just negotiating all that stuff. And it's all on your shoulders if you're
I love the business side of it. And, you know, when I was starting out, I was playing a lot of bar gigs in Memphis, my hometown, doing 3-hour sets of mostly cover songs and sneaking in originals. And then I got picked up by a college booking agency, which was putting me on these shows that paid well, but literally I'm playing at, you know, Billy Bob State Community College at noon in the cafeteria, and half the people in the room got their earbuds in. You know, I mean, it was just a payday, and it was how I funded my independent records. And in some ways, I was independent because I wasn't good enough, to be honest. And I think if I had come up 20 years earlier, when there was no, affordable way to record, I wouldn't be sitting here with us right now. But I had the time, the kind of the new kind of world of music. There's a lot more time to develop. It's obviously also makes for a much more crowded playing field. And the thing I always say is that there's never been a worse time to make a killing in music, but there's never been a better time to make a living.
Yeah.
I learned that for me, I had a small enough but competent team that we could release records on our own, and financially, as a businessman, we could beat the labels. You know, if you're with a label and you sell 100,000 records, I can sell 20 and I'll make more money than you by a long shot.
It's interesting, you know, there's a couple of direct differences. One, you say there's no better time to make a living. And the traditional country music world, it's just the opposite, you know, because Luke Bryan, Jason Aldean, I mean, they're selling stadiums, you know, and Ronnie and I at our peak, you know, we were selling out coliseums and sheds, but we never sold out a stadium. You know, towards the end, we hooked up with Chesney and we sold some stadiums. But as far as when I was making a living as a songwriter, when we got hot in the 90s, it's like everybody was selling platinum. You know, a million CDs, if you sold less than 500,000 CDs, you got dropped, you know. So if you had a song on any of those albums, that was good for 15, 20, 30 grand. As far as just raising a family and having a job like any other job, a middle-class job, if you could write good songs, granted you had to be one of the 10 songs on those albums, but there were a lot of albums that sold a lot of CDs. And, you know, for Ronnie and I, Boot Scootin' Boogie's a classic example, was on Brand New Man, and we sold like 12 million CDs of Brand New Man, but we wrote all the songs on the album, so we got paid on all those songs, and our co-writers got paid on all those songs because you couldn't buy a single of Boot Scootin' Boogie or Brand New Man,
you had to spend $14
or
to
My
buy the
Maria,
record.
or My Maria, and a CD was at that time was $15, $16. So you know, it was a great time as a songwriter. If you could get one song on a million selling album a year, you were 25 or 30 grand a year guy who could have a decent house and have a couple of kids and everything was okay. With Spotify and Pandora in this world, and if somebody has a hit with a song, it's huge. So it's a great time to make a killing. If you're hot, it's never been any hotter. But if you're not, I think our songwriting community in country music has probably gone from 250 probably real professional songwriters when I was doing it to probably maybe 100 now.
Yeah, wow. That's definitely a big difference because in kind of the indie Americana world, if you will, you know, there's not necessarily a great radio apparatus for artists like us. But what has happened for me, especially the way that I've been able to kind of keep the wheels on the bus, are through TV placements. You know, in 6 years, I've had probably 35 TV placements, and those can range in anywhere from a 30-second thing on, you know, MTV3, you know, or whatever, which pays $400, or it can be a national commercial that pays you close to six figures. And so that, you know, anybody who writes a song on my record is not going to make enough money for a nice night out with their wife, you know, but that's about it. You know,
And it's pretty much for everybody that
yeah,
way, unless you have a single.
So, question for you: when you said that, like Aldine and Luke Bryan and guys like that, what's the difference now between why are they able to sell those kind of tickets? Is it because of consolidation of radio, or what is it that pushes those top 4 or 5 acts to such crazy heights?
You know, it's honestly, country music is really hot now.
Yeah.
I don't think consolidation of radio really has anything to do with it. Yeah, it's like those acts, and country music traditionally has really supported their stars. So when someone is a star, then they're in demand. They're in demand at all the radio stations, and so they do get a lot of support. And they've just connected with a younger audience.
From my perspective as an outsider, on a song level, there does seem to be, though, a little bit of a difference between what was going on when I was growing up. You know, folks like you guys and George Strait and Garth and Reba, the like level of songwriting seemed to be so much more classic, and maybe that's just, you know, a middle-aged curmudgeon looking at what's going on now and going, man, these songs just don't hold up to what I was hearing as honestly kind of a periphery country fan. You know, I was more of a Nirvana, Pearl Jam guy as a kid, but I loved. I mean, I remember where I was coming home from a dove hunt with my cousins as a 14-year-old when I heard George Strait's Cheyenne, and I was going through a 14-year-old heartbreak, and I'm in the back of my cousin's Bronco crying like a baby in the dark. And I thought, man, I got to have more of this music. And I went out and I bought a Tracy Lawrence record and Brooks and Dunn. You know, there's like these records that, and maybe it's just nostalgia, but it does feel like as a somewhat like, you know, astute observer of songwriting that what's going on now. I mean, the other night at the CMAs, there was even a moment where I was like, I can't remember a chorus. You know, and I don't know if, you know, do you feel like there has been a shift in the approach to songwriting in your world?
There is, and right now I think, you know, and bro country is the word that keeps getting thrown around because it's all about
easy
trucks
whipping
and
boy.
bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you know what it is it's a lot of young people that are having a great time, and it's about an event.
Yeah.
And so you get that with electronic music. It's the same thing, and they're not even words. It's like it's an event. It's a place to meet, and as far as a stadium full of kids all having the same good time in their trucks and whatever, but it's just a music that's got a great beat. It's all driving. It's all talking about subject matter. Hell, when I was 17, 18 years old, we had a place called Wallace Lake. Every day after work or after school, you know, if we did it for years, we'd meet out there, and there's always 20 or 30 people that you knew, and it's the same thing. Tailgates, we'd all drag up wood from around, you know, wherever. We build a big bonfire, and I hear all those songs, and I hear those guys defending those songs, and I'm like, you should defend them. Sure. You're talking about something. I know exactly what you were doing because I was doing the same damn thing. And we were listening to Allman Brothers and Marshall Tucker and all that kind of Charlie Daniels. Yeah. But a lot of those songs, looking back, you know, kind of had the same sort of groove and whatever. Yeah. But in defense of today's songwriting, I mean, you've still got The House That Built Me, and I drive that truck, and there's, you know, Miranda's got a whole list of them, and Casey Musgraves, Girl Crush. There's still, I do a top 30 countdown show, and for everybody that says it all sounds the same, it doesn't.
Right.
There's songwriters still out there writing great songs, and they're commercially successful, and we get caught up because you know, there's this whole fun factor that's going on, and it's like, oh, that's just a bunch of trash. Well, some of it's throwaway, but since I've been in town since 1979, it's always been that way.
Yeah.
Do you feel like every business, every organization feels pressure from the outside? You know, so I mean, think of any industry. You hear about disrupting companies and disrupting industries. So do you ever feel pressure to change who you are, change what you think you are? Do you ever even temporarily entertain the idea of, do I need to go explore something that seems to be getting attention, but I'm not sure if that's me or not?
Yeah, I mean, I think anybody who's honest would say that you're looking around and sometimes you feel like you're getting beat. And, I had an interesting conversation with my manager, who's a very close friend recently. We've had a great record cycle, but definitely, like we were talking about earlier, as an artist, you're never finished. You're never, you never feel like you've arrived. And that's not just true as an artist. It's probably true of most entrepreneurs. You feel like you start something and you want to see it grow. You can always improve. And there's that fine line of looking at other people for ideas and improvement versus envy and jealousy and having it kind of force a change that's unnecessary. You lose perspective. And for every one artist that you look at with that envy or jealousy, there's probably 10 behind you doing the same thing to you, and you can just get completely wrapped up in that cycle. Somebody asked me years ago, "What's your goal?" And at the time there were 4 of us in a van and a trailer, and I said, "My goal is that I can employ my band, like that they can make a wage for a show or a week that they can look back and go, man, I'm appreciated for what I do," and which in music is tough. Because, artists, we can talk all day about how hard it is out there, but the guys who are really schlepping it are the guitar players, the drummers, the tour managers who are getting paid week to week, who, you can find a guy who was playing for Carrie Underwood a year ago, and now he's playing Lower Broadway because he lost the gig, and maybe it was a professional failure, maybe it was a personal failure, maybe it was just so-and-so didn't like playing with so-and-so and he got kicked to the street. And so for me, there's one thing that I've tried to differentiate with myself is that I've tried to be loyal to the guys that have played with me. A bass player and guitar player have been with me now for 10 years. And, there's just everybody's got a different idea of what success means for them. And I think for me as a businessman, it was like one of the things that could be kind of a goal that's an attainable goal is to build a team of people who make their living doing what they love because you treat them well and because everybody works hard.
The people that are making the music, what Drew's saying, I know is very true for us, and it's why we toured for 20 years without stopping and quit when we did, because we had such an amazing team/family together. They all were with us all the time. Occasionally, if you have a player or something that goes off the rails, you have to protect. You're responsible for the rest of your crew, So you have to take care of issues. But beyond that, I think to answer to your question about do you ever try to chase trends or this or that, you have to be aware of it. But think of the great artists, think of Bruce Springsteen. How far now? He's still. I saw him last year for the 18th millionth time. It was one of the greatest shows I've ever seen him perform. All the energy, great band, great musicians after all they've been through all those years. But he's not really selling records now. But he's totally true to himself. James Taylor, same thing. Or what if those guys, imagine Bruce doing a Taylor Swift thing or something. How upsetting would that be, Or James Taylor doing some hip-hop thing that was totally out of character for him. Right. It's just like, oh, man, don't do that. Yeah. So I think, an artist at some point also has a responsibility to the fans that have made him the artist that he is today. Instead of trying to chase someone else's tail, we chase our own tail sometimes, trying to do something better or more creative. You don't want to do the same thing over and over again. But you have to find your parameters of what I am as an artist, and then try and push the walls a little bit on that, to be as exciting as you can. But, when you jump over the wall and leave your fans behind, it doesn't usually end well.
So how often, or do you think of yourself as a brand? Do you think of Kix Brooks as a brand? Do you think of Drew Holcomb as a brand? And how does that play into the thinking of what the next step is?
It's a clinical word. I thought it was much more easy to use with Brooks and Dunn because we could detach ourselves and creating something as a couple of guys doing something. And what do a couple of guys do? What are the boundaries on that? And what songs are going to work for a couple of guys on stage? And it was a lot easier. But yeah, most people probably won't know it's me because I don't have a cowboy hat on, you know. And I remember when Alan shaved his mustache, you know, people went crazy. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was a great friend of mine. For a freaking race car driver, he shaved his mustache only because he couldn't go as deep as another race car driver who was on his boat with him to get the big lobsters. He had to shave it to get his mask to seal. And
so he could breathe.
His fans went nuts. Wow. So his mask didn't leak, you know. But, I mean, people get, you know, I think about Willie Nelson, you know, and that's where I always go. And Blake Shelton was giving me shit the other day for having tennis shoes on. I go, what? He goes, man, you're one of my heroes. You're supposed to be wearing cowboy boots. I go, Willie wears tennis shoes. He goes, yeah, not like those. I'm like, what? Shut up, you know, but it is, people get mad if you get outside your thing. But what was Willie, how did Willie have a brand? You know, it's like sometimes pigtails, sometimes cowboy hat, sometimes tennis shoes, sometimes ball cap. Whoops, shaved his beard off, you know, but he was always Willie.
It's a fine line of like, you know, you don't want to become a parody of yourself, you know. Yeah. It's like, you know, to be frank around this table, I wear a hat because I'm a pretty significantly balding 33-year-old. You know, people like it, but I don't wear it much around town. I wear, you know, a golf cap because I find me often on the golf course. And I'm not going to wear this, you know, trying to hit a 9-iron. But at the same time, you know, you do have to, you know, I think, at least I do, I think about myself kind of as a second or third priority as a brand, you know. I wouldn't release a record under another name just for the hell of it. You know, it's like people know my name. They know kind of, relatively speaking, what to expect. Hopefully those boundaries will be challenged. Like, you know, Springsteen has made a lot of great records, and they've definitely had some expand. You know, when he made Streets of Philadelphia and that kind of era, it was a little bit of a different palette, but it was the same thing. Mm-hmm. There's still these songs about people and about real things. You know, so you kind of, you know, doing this festival, it's like, you know, it's presented by me. I certainly, one of the great things about your brand being your name is that you can kind of, depending on what you're doing, you can kind of leverage it to get attention. You know, you can build something. And my newest project is that we're gonna start a record club, which is basically like a rock and roll book club, but for vinyl. You know, and try to get people to subscribe monthly. And it's cool because I can pick music that I love from artists that they may know or may not know, and some of those people are my friends, and I can get a signed record for people, or they can get my record a month early. And you know, there's so many ideas out there, and in some ways I think people would be a fool if their curiosities are there not to leverage their success to continue to build and expand on what you do. But you have to do it without losing sight of what got you there in the first place. Sure. You know, so if I spend all my time on these other ideas and don't sit down and write songs, eventually the whole thing is going to fall. The whole thing could go apart.
What do you think some of the most important things are that you've done, where you look back and say, in your 10 years and in the history of all that you've done, do you have some key turning points as you look back and just the success that you've had thus far?
Career-wise, for me, my last run, I played in New Orleans before I came to Nashville in '79. My last run was 72 nights in a row. I was playing from 9 at night till 6 in the morning at the old Absence House down on Bourbon Street. and I freaking loved it till I didn't anymore. And I called an old friend of mine, Jody Williams here, who's at BMI now. And he had tried to convince me, we were roommates in military school, and he tried to convince me to come here and write songs. He was with Charlie Daniels at the time. And I was just so whooped, man. I said, you really think I could make a living writing songs? He said, get your butt up here. And that, for me, was from just being a barfly, banging on a guitar, you know, getting my $100 at the end of the night, which for a while was fun and games, to really wanting to be a professional and taking the business, you know, seriously.
When I graduated from college, University of Tennessee, I was a pretty good student. Like I was actually headed towards a postgraduate degree in history with a plan of teaching. But I had started writing songs and started playing a few shows in Knoxville, and I just decided, I was like, maybe I'll give this a 1-year run, you know. And so I called my dad, who's a dentist, tone deaf dentist, but music lover for sure. And I said that, Dad, we need to go get some breakfast. I want to talk to you about what I'm thinking about for my life. And we had this bagel shop down the street from our house. We go for all those kind of conversations. We're pretty tight. And I said, Dad, I think I want to be a traveling singer-songwriter. What do you think about that? And, which is not exactly every dad's dream for their son.
Every doctor's dream for his son.
Yeah, exactly. And he just asked me, he said, are you going to work hard at that? And I said, yes, sir, I am. He said, all right, let's go down to the guitar shop. And he said, I'll get you the best thing I can afford, which was a pretty nice guitar. He got me a Rosewood Larrabee, and sent me on my way. For me, that was, probably the first 3 or 4 years, that was the biggest kick in the pants. Was just so many people that I meet in Nashville and around the country have to do what they do in spite of home. And so to do it with the backing of home was a major turning point. I mean, to answer the question, but it gave me a real chance to make it a real goal. So 1 year turned into 12, and hopefully it looks like it might turn into 30 or 40. So that's the plan, at least.
If you had to start over today, but knowing what you know, and knowing where the industry is, all the lessons you've learned up to this point, you have those still. What would you do?
Well, besides borrowing $30,000 to buy Apple stock. Besides that, knowing what I know today, I would, to kind of bring the conversation full circle, I wish that I had spent more time in the early years on the craft of songwriting and less time trying to book another show, play another bar, get paid. And in my opinion, I released music too soon because I was so eager to get out there, and I thought I was better than I was. And then the second thing I would tell my 23-year-old self is that the old adage of kind of envy is the biggest enemy. Quit looking at everybody else and just do what you do, and stop worrying about what everybody else is doing. It took me a long time to let that sink in.
When I got to town, I think, and I won't say it's the biggest mistake I ever made because it was a great learning experience, but my friend Jody opened a lot of doors for me to get a publishing company. And I had wrote and recorded, 5 or 6 of my best songs. And they were all so nice, MCA Publishing and this and that, and they all, would listen to like a verse and go to the next song and the next song. And they're like, cool, yeah, keep working at it. And cool, So I went home and wrote some more, and then nobody answered my phone calls. And I'm like, oh. So maybe I'm not as good as I thought. But that was a turning point for me, because then, since I didn't really know anything about commercial country music, and I really hadn't practiced the craft of songwriting, I hadn't really worked at it.
Yep.
I just was writing stuff I liked, but I hadn't really thought about what makes a good song.
Yeah.
And I started pulling the top 10 off the radio. I would record them on my cassette and started taking them apart, and I went, damn, it's like every line's great. I got this whole new appreciation for what I was trying to do. And man, I really sharpened my pencil up, and I hunkered down for a while. And the next year I started having success. I was fortunate that those people ever let me come back through their doors with those horrible songs that I played them. But sometimes, without anybody, necessarily hurting your feelings, you get sent the message, and and finding your own identity is, if you're ever going to be an artist and really have success, you got to find your own voice, and just whatever it is, you got to be honest to yourself, or you'll never be able to repeat it.
Yep.
Well, thank you guys. This has been great conversation.
It's been fun. Thanks.
I really appreciate you guys joining us.
Appreciate the groceries.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thanks.